Right. There's, for as long as there have been rules, there have been people who figure out ways, to profit from the rules. And
Yeah.
I would just say in the US, that's taxes. I mean, there are whole industries where people figure out ways to pay minimal taxes. Like you say, how does Warren Buffett pay less taxes than a secretary? Well, it's
Yeah.
because he actually worked at it and paid attention. And there are always loopholes.
Yes.
That's just the way it is. And that's really, and also for all you out there, this is why whatever business you ever choose to do, whether it's, hey, I want to, do what Shaun does, I want to, learn more about that, the short-term rentals and do that. You want to learn from someone who's doing it successfully. That's all. That's like, and it doesn't matter what business you're doing. The do-it-yourselfer way, it is very, fraught with problems. You're going to have headaches. You're going to do unnecessary damage, and you're going to have a lot of unnecessary effort and stress. That if you just follow someone who knows what the heck they're doing, they'll get you through the jungle without being eaten by a lion
Yeah,
or scratched
exactly.
up by a bear, because they've already been down those roads. And sometimes, when you're looking at any business, you see the outer layer of the onion. Maybe if you're really good, you see two or three layers in. But talk to someone who's been there for a while, or a man or a woman who's been doing it. They're 7 layers in, and you just can't. Very few people would ever be brilliant enough to see a couple layers in. But the man or woman who's been out there in the field, yes, they're the one. That's why no matter what you're doing, don't think of all life as a do-it-yourself project. It's not that. That's a very inefficient, hard, risky way to do things. Think of it when you're looking for a business. Hey, I want to find something that fits my personality, that really jazzes me up. Like if what Shaun's talking about really gets you excited. And then your next question is, all right, how can I learn from this person who's doing it successfully? Like, how can I do that?
Yeah.
That's really your question, because that's just the smartest thing. And the other thing I'll share with everybody here, it is a smart person disease. The people who
Yes.
are successful, doctors, lawyers, overly educated people or highly educated people, like I could figure it out. And yes, give it enough time and brain damage, you can figure it out. But don't. It's not a good plan. I
Yes.
would rather, in the business I teach, I would rather have some guy or woman that just graduated from the military that's used to getting directions and following them. And I'd say,
Hmm.
here's what you do. And then, like a good soldier, they go out and do it. And guess what? They're successful at it. And,
And
when I
you
get
know
people
what's
like, and I'll just say, finish my one last part of my speech here. So the last thing I'll say, a lot of times I get very, very smart people, doctors and lawyers and engineers and things like that. And before they've done even their first deal, they want to tell me how to do the overages business. And I'm like,
yes.
sometimes you come up with a couple odd good ideas and it's really great, but you're going to miss far more often than you're going to hit. And I don't care if anybody learns from me or someone else, but go like learn from somebody, use their system, and then build on top of their shoulders. And that is the way, that is the smart, savvy way to do it. So I'm done with my speech, Shaun.
No, you
Continue.
reminded me of something. You reminded me of a quote because you mentioned, smart, hardworking people, they tend to overthink things. And I have there's a quote that I heard recently. It was by Alex Hormozy, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but he said something along the lines of, a smart, hardworking person comes up with a hardworking solution. And I have a story to tell about that, so
Oh,
that
that's such a good, such a
it
good
makes
line.
sense. So for me, I considered myself a smart, hardworking person. But what did that get me when I was trying to do it myself, like Bob was alluding to? Well, I was in banking and I decided to do the cleaning myself. That's a micro example, right? So again, smart, hardworking person, you're coming up with a hardworking solution. Let's do all the cleaning myself. Let's do all the check-ins and check-outs myself. That's a hardworking solution. Like, yes, you're a hard worker, but you at some point you got to figure out, okay, what's the cheat code? Can I get a mentor that's already done this? And that's Bob's whole point. Can you find somebody and learn from them because they've already been through the trial and error? Whereas
Yes.
somebody like myself, when I was 22, 23, I just thought I could figure it out myself. Well, you
And
can.
you can,
You can figure it out
you
yourself.
can.
You're just going to burn a lot of your time, but you certainly can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a good way to do it. I mean, it's funny. I think it's like a lot of things in life. When you get too far to the margins, it sometimes doesn't work. Like when someone's too smart and they've heard that message you're talking about, like you immigrant parents, I'm not surprised at all. They're like, work hard, son, and you can succeed in this, new society we've come to. And it's true. You can succeed to a degree for sure. And,
Yes.
got you a long way. I mean, having a successful corporate career when you're really family couldn't give you much guidance for how Canadian society and business worked, I'm sure. But
And
you worked it. And I think
yeah,
it's
and
that's a writer downer for everybody.
yeah, there's another story I can share too, because I think when I was in my 20s, my obsession was how do I minimize my expenses versus focusing on how do I maximize revenues and how do I scale up. So I'll tell you an interesting story about how if you obsess about expenses, it's going to actually hurt you in the long run. So here's what happened. When I put that first Airbnb full time on Airbnb, so I moved out of it, I put it on Airbnb, I had nowhere to live. So what I did was, and I'm in my mid 20s, I have a successful six-figure banking career. I move in with my parents. Like that's how cheap I was, because I'm like, it's about expense minimization, not revenue maximization, expense minimization. So I move in with my parents. So I do this long enough where I eventually buy a house for my parents, and the house is 2 levels. I put the first level of the house on Airbnb, and that starts paying off the mortgage. But here's the problem: the second floor of the house only has 2 bedrooms. My
Oh no.
young brother takes one bedroom. My parents take the other bedroom. I blow up an air mattress in the living room, and I'm literally sleeping on this air mattress. Now the property was an hour away from downtown Vancouver. So every
Oh,
morning I had an hour commute to downtown, an hour commute back to a city called Maple Ridge, because my obsession was expense minimization. So I literally scaled the Airbnb business to 11 units, and I was sleeping on a floor mattress, and I had a six-figure banking job. And I can tell you one thing: I was stressed out, I was overweight, I was not in a happy state of mind. Like, yes, I was making money, I was not in a happy state of mind. So, and here's the interesting thing that happened: the moment that I switched from expense minimization to revenue maximization, here's what happened. Something very simple. I moved back to downtown Vancouver, and I actually started paying rent. I stopped Airbnb that one property. It freed up so much of my time that I was able to scale from 11 units to 24 units.
that's
So
such
this
a
is
great
very
point. And I
interesting.
think that's a
Yeah.
that's a great point for everybody to get, because I think, and this we could talk about this. I think there's a shift in mindset from employee to business owner, and I want to get your take on this, Shaun. So my thought: if you're an employee, you make X number of dollars per year. Let's say $100,000. So you make
Yeah.
100 grand. If you want more in life and a better life, your income is fixed. So that means that you're going to do things yourself, like maybe put down new tile on the floor or paint
Yeah.
the house or, do a renovation. You're going to do those things, which you spend time to do. There's no question.
Yeah.
Or you're going to minimize your expenses, but you
Mhm.
can never minimize your way to a fortune. You could just minimize your life to a little way to a little better life. When you shift to business owner, you need to shift your mindset to how can I increase the revenue side of the business while still holding a profit margin? But how can I do that? You focus on that, because, like you pointed out, when you saved all that time, all of a sudden you have time to go acquire extra units, and maybe every unit, maybe it makes you $500 a month or 1,000 a month, whatever it is, doesn't
Yeah.
matter. But when you have 10 of them, all of a sudden, hey, there's an extra 5 grand a month. It's probably more than that, but it's the
Yeah.
point. Make it simple math. So when you're thinking about shifting to being a business owner, you got to shift your thinking to how can I save my time rather than save your money, and how can I increase my top line revenue, I mean my money coming in, assuming that what you do is profitable with each additional unit. And I think that's a good lesson, an important lesson that I think you have to learn when you shift from employee to entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs are going to have a better life by scaling up and getting more. Like, I'd rather have 100 units at a 3% profit than 5 units at a 20% profit. For me,
Yes.
I'd rather have that.
Yes.
So
And it goes back to the very simple principle that I'm sure we've all read in the book E Myth. If you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend anyone watching to read the book. But the very
me
simple
too.
principle is you can only get so far if you're working in your business. So if you're the guy cleaning the toilets and changing the sheets, you can only go so far. At some point, you have to work on your business and not in your business. And the moment I read that book and figured out that concept, I started spending money to grow my business, to grow the top line instead of obsessing about expense minimization.
Yeah, and that, for anybody who doesn't know that, so the E Myth, very famous book. It's great. It's by a guy named Michael Gerber,
Mhm.
and I think for a new entrepreneur, that's a must read for a new entrepreneur for sure. because that'll give you that mindset. And that's a classic. That's got to be
Yeah.
20 years old at least.
Yes.
But
Very good.
it's a classic for a reason to me. And so a couple of questions, because I'm thinking, what would someone listening to this say? Oh, this sounds wonderful. Sounds like a view into this whole great world. So a question I often get when people are thinking about the things that I teach people are, well, can I do this? Is one of the questions. So it's sometimes, can anybody do this? Is this possible for pretty much anyone out there, with the exception of, you'd mentioned maybe someone with a disability, which I'm guessing is, I don't know, is it severe depression or something, or a brain injury? Or...
Well, the severe depression is, the severe depression can be neurological imbalances, but it also could be suppression issues from childhood or adulthood. So suppression usually can happen because of somebody suppressing their emotions and their thoughts, and they've been minimized long enough to be in a depressed state versus an expressed state. So you can change their physiology to change their neurology. But that's for another discussion. But I want to share a story with you. Several years ago, this woman was on one of my free webinars, master classes that we do. And she was in her early 80s. I think she was 81 years old. And she said, hey, listen, I'm a wedding planner in the island of Kauai. My husband has cancer. I used to make about $70,000, $80,000 a year, which helped us live here, really well. And my husband used to work; he can't now. And my wedding planning business is just about bankrupt. Will this inner size stuff help me? I said, well, the answer is yes, because even at 80 or 81 years old, your brain has got the ability to make new neurons, neurogenesis, and actually the ability to create new pathways. So she started to inner size every day. She learned a little bit more about marketing and sales, which she needed to upgrade her knowledge and skills. And within 12 months, she went from almost being bankrupt at 81 to making $247,500. And the story didn't end there, because she was blown away that she did that, but she had a vision of creating $250,000 in income. She took $50,000 of that money, it's actually $55,000, booked a trip for her and her husband to go to Thailand, business class air seats, 5-star hotels, and a spectacular trip for 30 days. She came back. She wrote me a letter, sent pictures to us of her trip with her husband, and several months later, he died from cancer. But he said to her, thank you so much for putting the icing and the cherry on our life together. I'll see you on the other side. And he died. She closed down her wedding planning business, and then she died 2 years later. So what's the moral of the story? At an early age, it's easy to create the patterns. When we're older, it's a little bit harder, but still doable. And so when you create that new image, when you are vibrating at the level of that new image, when you apply the skills required for the level that you want to achieve, everything is possible. But you have to turn, your mindset of doubt and fear and worry and anxiety and your stories and excuses into the fuel to become the next best version of yourself. And most of us need a little bit of coaching and guidance, to do that, because when we're looking at changing our brain, the new research shows that it's about 66 days to 365 days to develop a new thought, emotional, or behavioral habit. Okay, so as soon as we learn something new, we formulated a bit of the pattern. But it's the reinforcement of that pattern every day a little bit, every day a little bit, every day a little bit. It's the spaced repetition that creates the pattern that then recreates you and reinforces you. So whenever I have any students, I say, tell me your vision, tell me your goals, and are you willing to commit to at least 100 days of changing your thoughts, emotions, and behavior so we can create a pattern that's strong enough to build itself? And if you say no, I can't help you. You say, yes, I can help you. And I don't care what age you are and how bad your situation is. We can make meaningful progress in 100 days, but it takes you being committed to you. And then I can show you the blueprint and the pathway and give you the support. But if you're not committed and you think 100 days is too long, good, keep trying your way and come back to me when you're ready.
I think that's wonderful. I love your approach too. I've had coaches in my life. I had one very memorable Russian guy who was just he carried around an axe with him, and anything he would do, he'd get axed. And it was tough. It was very tough being coached, by a person like that. I love the fact that you're positive. All right, go try it your way, and when you're ready, I'll be here. Come back. That's just great. I love that.
I learned in my business and businesses to get out of the convincing business.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And it's funny when I know some of the people that are listening to this will be in the overages business that I'm in. So that's just to tell you what it is. We help people who've lost a house at foreclosure get a refund of any extra money that's left over. Yep. So we help a lot of people significantly where their problem at that moment is being extremely short of money. Yep. And I get people that are afraid to make calls because they don't want to pester somebody. I'm like, please pester them. They'll be happy when you get them a check for $20,000 or $30,000 or more. They'll be absolutely thrilled. But I can't fix those things. Like if there's not that willingness to do it, and where I think the connection with you and what you teach is, and for anyone out there, all of us at every level, especially the high performers, seek mentors and coaches, and we listen to them. And, when you meet someone like, for example, John, who we're chatting with, a font of information, obviously deeply skilled in, the science of how the mind works and how it influences the world that you inhabit and the world that you create and the world you can create, or the world you won't create if you're thinking the wrong way. And, the people that are successful, I promise you, all of them have mentors and coaches, virtually all of whom have something that they get out of it. There's sometimes people want to a mentor or someone does something for you for free. There's nothing free. The only things mentors will ever do for you for free occasionally is when they feel like they want an emotional lift out of something. They may, like I think in your case, John, this is a family connection that just, someone says, hey, you got to help my brother out. This guy is in real trouble. He's going to go down the tubes. Could you please just have lunch with him? And probably after a little convincing, I says, all right, I'll have lunch. And then he just tests you out with a couple things. And you got very fortunate to be in the mood to listen and to get that mentor. And for all of you out there, you don't harvest before you plant. And your planting in this case is plant the seeds of investment in your own mindset, your own learning. Yeah. And I promise you, everybody can do better. I can, John can, I can, you can. It's out there.
I still study every day.
And there's a method to grow an email list. It shouldn't be as complicated as some people make it seem.
I really appreciate what you're saying, Igor, because I know with what we teach, all that I really ask people to do is follow the system. And that's part of what I was saying to people earlier. If you're going to follow someone, spend time figuring out what you want to do. If you want to do email marketing or we do overages, whatever it is, find someone who really knows what they're doing and then just follow their system. And I also have this experience that there's a disease I would call the smart guy disease or smart woman disease. And that's that smart people tend to think they know more than they know about other topics. Like they're not the topic they're in. Like you get a doctor and they're really smart about being a doctor, but then they become, say, a real estate investor or a day trader or something, and they get their heads handed to them because they don't know what they're doing. Those are investors I actually generally don't take. If someone wants to invest in one of my deals and they're a doctor or a lawyer, I probably don't want them because they then want to direct things when they have no business doing that because they don't know it. They know what they know, but that's not that other area. So I would say for anybody out there, whether you learn from Igor, whether you learn from me or whatever, follow what the person tells you, and then you earn the right to make changes later after you're successful. Then I would say you can start massaging things and changing them. Because as Igor said, there's different ways to skin cats. So there are different ways to be successful with what I do with overages, with what you do with email and online marketing. There are different ways to be successful, but what doesn't generally work is a new person mixing together two or three things. That's a disaster.
That's true. If I may, I want to chime in on some of this stuff. You mentioned that people kind of act like smartasses, right? And especially doctors, etc. And I agree. I'm Jewish, so I like a big part of my community is like IT guys and everything. And so you can't really share anything with those guys because they're like give you 5 different reasons why this won't work, etc. So I no longer try unless they really ask because they see the cars I'm driving or when I go to football games in Europe and stuff like that. But there's another side to this whole thing where people who come without any credentials or education, or at least high education, they tend to err on the other side of that spectrum, and they tend to say, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not fill in the blank enough, when you actually don't have to be, quote unquote, enough. The eye-opening experience for me was to go to my first internet marketing seminar in London and get to see firsthand, like just to meet in person, some of the people who I knew for a fact were online millionaires, people who show off their bank accounts online, people who have all the different programs and different things, and see and just talk to them in real life and see them get hammered in the bar, talk about their failed marriages, talk about all mistakes they made. And all of a sudden realizing I'm talking to just completely normal, regular people. And then I'm thinking, wait a sec. So this person is making 10 times the money I'm making, but I'm obviously more intelligent. I'm obviously more, you know what I mean? There's no way. And so going to my first seminar was an eye opener. Going back home from that seminar was like, there's no freaking way I'm not going to figure this out. There's just no way. And it's actually something that I was told by quite a few of my students as well. They were like, I looked at some of your case studies and I was like, this woman from California or this guy from Kansas or whatever. And I look at them and this person is exactly like me. And the moment somebody can recognize that, the moment somebody can look at another human and be like, wow, they seem like very much like me. And if they figured it out, all of a sudden they get the belief that they can, which is something I've told you many times about your program too. I was going through your program and checking out a lot of your success stories and case studies. And you often talk about how you got a UN of case studies and success stories going on.
I do at the United Nations. Yeah, I do.
And it's so true, because it's like, if all of these people succeeded, what excuse can you possibly have if you are a quote unquote average human being that's physically and mentally fit at the very basic level? Obviously, if somebody's mentally challenged, or if somebody's got a disease of some kind that prevents them from having the energy or the intelligence to operate on a computer, I get that. But if you're like an average person, no excuse. If you're an average person, there's literally like dozens and dozens of methods for you to make money. And then the issue becomes the focus. I remember going to a seminar earlier this year in Orlando, and I got on the plane, and I usually like to sit in the front because I'm afraid of flying. And up in the front, it's not as shaky. And I'm about to sit down and I hear someone say, Igor. So I turn around, and on the second row, there's this guy, probably in his 50s or 60s. And he's like, you're Igor, right? I was like, yeah. A bit paranoid. So I was like, yeah.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, I know you from the internet. Like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And so just so it happens that there was this guy who approached me in a few minutes and asked if I could switch seats with him, because the way the airlines are these days, for some reason, and this did happen to me a few times, they for some reason don't put the parent and the child together. Yeah, so he wanted to sit next to his daughter, who was scheduled to sit next to me. I said, yeah, no problem. And I ended up sitting next to this guy who called out my name. We get chatting, and turns out that he's in 5 different methods or businesses. He's going to seminars all the time. He is checking out different courses, and he seems to be succeeding a little bit with each one. But now he's finding it very difficult to keep up because he just got involved with way too many. So he's like the classic shiny object syndrome kind of person. So that becomes an issue.
That is completely. And I think you can be interested once you start getting interested in life. There are so many interesting things to do. And part of the key to that is a lot of them work perfectly well, or work even amazingly well, but you can't do everything. And I think that's an entrepreneurial disease. And I think when you learn how to control that and manage it, you're going to be far better off. And it's interesting. You had said someone does your thing for 6 months. Often they can become really successful. Ours is the same way, that it takes several months to really get some traction and start getting things going. And often people want success, I want 30 days to have this $1 million business. And that's just not realistic. I won the lottery. That would work then, but that's not really a business plan, I don't think.
Talk about mindset. I remember you've done the workshop, 3-day or 5-day workshop you've done